For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Hot inflation news out of the United States yesterday has meant that Asia-Pacific markets are ending the week on a downward trajectory. Unsurprisingly, really, I'll give you the details of it slightly later on, but basically, what's the big surprise? Of course, there was hot inflation from the United States. It's proving quite sticky there, and therefore more likely that the Fed will keep its interest rates high for longer, thus equities not doing particularly well. Now, I brought you news yesterday of all hype surrounding Apple and its patent on folding phones. Well, the Chinese giant smartphone giant Oppo is actually releasing one right now. It's a foldable phone. They're definitely after the high-end market. It's got a screen on the outside as well as a screen on the inside. So for those of you who like that kind of thing, they're desperate to expand into the rest of the world outside China, and this is where they feel that they will go to the high end of the smartphone market. China's top tech deal maker, there he is, a gentleman called Bao Fan, has gone missing in China. He hasn't been seen for 2 days. That's according to his company, China Renaissance, which has actually now he bought it as a boutique operation. It's now a huge financial company in China, and despite the Beijing tech crackdown, not too many worries about him at the moment, but he hasn't been seen for a couple of days, and that's enough to make headlines around the world. Let us talk about the United States then, and yes, hot inflation from them yesterday. Retail sales, as you know, January CPI up 2, but those were the previous days. Yesterday, we saw the PPI, Producer Price Index, up 0.7%. That was enough to scare the market. The Dow down about 431 points. So hot inflation is still sticky in the United States, and that's something the Fed will have to deal with. Tesla has recalled 362,000 vehicles as a result of the full self-driving, I'm quoting here, beta software. That beta software may cause crashes, and also there are lots of rumours about a lot of staff being sacked for trying to organise the labour force there. Tesla themselves have denied that, but that's again another rumour going round this morning. Right, now, I told you yesterday about David Malpass leaving the World Bank because it was felt that it hadn't focused enough on climate change. Who will replace him? Well, in the running is your very own Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is heading, as you know, the World Trade Organization right now. Now, this is the awarding of this it includes her, and good luck to her. The thing is that the awarding is done by the United States because they are the major shareholder in the World Bank. There are other people in the running too. There's the US ambassador to the UN, Samantha Porter, and also Raj Shah, who is the head of the Rockefeller Foundation. But Ms. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is definitely in the running. EU, and now this is about Renault and what they're saying. They announced a lot of cash flow yesterday, but their boss has been saying we are not going to join the price cutting exercise as far as electrical vehicles are concerned because we need to maintain the margins on those vehicles to keep going. So they're not going to they're not going to compete by cutting prices, and they're also offering dividends to shareholders to keep them on side. As far as the EU is concerned, the European Central Bank is apparently working on a digital currency. Now, there have been bites of this from various central banks around the world. The fact about Europe is that MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, Alipay and so on are the top payment companies, and Europe's not really represented amongst them. It feels as though it's losing ground, and we can expect a decision probably much later in the year, around about autumn time, I think, from the ECB. As far as the UK is concerned, UK Now, Standard Chartered is based in London, as you know, but the fact of the matter is, of course, it straddles the world, and the CEO is saying it's not up for sale. There's been a lot of chatter about Standard Chartered being up for sale, particularly by the First Abu Dhabi Bank, but both Standard Chartered and First Abu Dhabi have said there are no talks going on at the moment, but that chatter is still remaining. UK economists are pretty convinced that inflation is also sticky within the UK, and that's pushing up the thought of rate hikes continuing for longer in the UK. The bets are on a 25 basis point, a quarter of a percentage raise at the next meeting. Inflation 10.1% in January, slightly down, but not much. I mean, what's new about that again? But I'm merely quoting what economists are saying this morning. And rail workers have voted for more strikes. And this in March and April, 40,000 workers belong to the RMT union, and they have voted to continue their industrial action, or perhaps that should be industrial inaction. Crypto markets have gains. Bitcoin particularly is shown that maybe it hit the bottom of the market when it was, and it's now coming up. And maybe the market itself has gained about $84 billion. That's according to one of the crypto exchanges. How they calculate that, not quite sure, but that's what they're saying this morning. And definitely the worst is over. The whole crypto market is feeling quite bullish as we speak, in spite of the fact, as I was telling you yesterday, that regulation is going to get much tougher. And finally, oil edging very much higher. They're getting good news out of the United States. They feel the economy is strong. I would caution the fact that doesn't just mean that the US economy is strong, but also the dollar is stronger. And I would have thought that might be an inhibiting factor. And the jury is still out as to whether China is going to come roaring back from its lockdown. That is the global view this morning.
All right. Kudos to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala again. In our hearts here, we know she will get it. She should get it. I mean, because she's worked in vice presidential capacity at the World Bank, and she knows the in and out of the World Bank. So that's just a little patriotic pride there. But let's talk about the UK economy as we speak today. Yes, inflation numbers, not as severe as was first projected, to about 12 or 13%. But the impact in the lives of people is still high. Their cost of living is still biting that. The real inflation, the cost of products are still high out there. It looks as though since the Liz Truss and Kwesi Kwarteng run on the financial system in the UK, the imbalance has still been there. And it looks as though nothing is getting any better in the UK. Rishi Sunak has just tried to stem the tide, but nothing has gotten better. And it's indicative in the strikes, the cost of living problems, and the fact that the outlook on the UK is at an all-time low. And I ask you this frontally, Michael, was Brexit, it's beginning to be obvious now, that was Brexit truly a disaster, or it was a well-thought-out decision? Because it was obvious with all of this happening that the arguments were not right. And if the UK was still in the EU, they would still have had buffers to all of this happening to the UK as we speak today.
I wouldn't blame any of it, I wouldn't blame a lot of it on Brexit. I feel as though our independence from whatever you think is going on in the EU is no bad thing. It's going to be very difficult indeed, but we need our neighbours and the neighbours need us, and it's as simple as that. And it's definitely been shown by the Russian invasion of Ukraine as well. So I think all that's happened. Truss has said herself that she doesn't want to be in the running to be Prime Minister again. She's actually, as I understand it, again, I'm no political expert, but as I understand it, she's actually said that. But the idea of lower taxes and more growth is getting a lot of support within the Conservative Party, as you'd expect. Unfortunately, both her and Kwesi Kwarteng said it at the wrong time. That's what happened there. And also, I mean, you can look at the OBR, because they didn't give their approval to her budget, and you can say, did they always get their forecast right? No, they didn't. So I think you're right. But I think the most important thing you said was you were taking away inflation from the cost of living. Inflation may be falling very, very slightly, but the cost of living, the actual cost of living, food inflation, for example, the cost of food is really rising, and that doesn't do anybody favors. So I think the outlook is very, very grim indeed. I think we may avoid a recession, but that's all just technical stuff. What really matters is family purses, where the families actually want to spend their money. And I think that, as you quite rightly say, the cost of living is extremely high. The UK is not alone in that, though, I have to say.
All right. Okay, so just very quickly, Michael, going back to the World Bank, and because it's quite important, when you mention Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, for many Nigerians, it's a moment of pride. But the US is said, or Joe Biden is said to be supporting or backing Rajiv Shah, who is currently the head of the Rockefeller Foundation. Traditionally, the World Bank, the US appoints or chooses who becomes the head of the World Bank, and Europe supports who becomes the managing director. International development champions have criticized this over the years, that this is backward, and moving forward, the recruitment process for the head of the World Bank should be transparent and should be across the world, not just the US cherry-picking, or well, not cherry-picking, but anointing the next head of the World Bank. What's your view on this?
Well, my view is that I wish her all the best, and I think she would probably make a very good World Bank. But you said it yourself. It's not within my gift, and it's not within your gift, and it's not within Nigeria's gift either. It's all about the US, because they are the largest shareholders, whether you like it or not, in the World Bank, and traditionally they make the decision. I think it would be a very, very good move to have her as the chairperson of the World Bank, because her credentials are superb. She clearly is a woman who knows exactly what she wants, and she would start a process of diversification, which you quite rightly point to, in all these large organizations. But it is down to the United States at the moment, because they quite simply are the World Bank's largest shareholder. I have to say, though, it would be a good move for them to appoint her.
All right. Well, thank you.
Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotu Diri joins us. Rotu, good to see you. Good morning, man.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, we begin with the Moody's. Moody's putting out a note saying that FX shortages could impact liquidity in Nigeria, and what commercial banks extend trade finance to companies in Nigeria that import items into the country, and so they are on the hook for those payments if those companies are not able to repay those credit lines that are extended to them. So look, we're import dependent, so there is of course going to be a large buildup of trade finance credits that are extended to these companies. And you also think about the fact that how is Nigeria able to repay this foreign exchange? It's through, of course, the ability to be able to generate more. And so you've got the oil theft issues and our inability to attract enough foreign direct investment. Then this is something Moody's has brought up. I mean, there's also they're saying the likelihood of a devaluation in order to try to meet up with the fact that you've got these FX shortages. So again, this is yet another hurdle that the next administration is going to have to face. Now, if they give up on paying subsidies, then you're possibly looking for a way to save enough revenue that can be put towards defending the currency in terms of trying to get enough FX, because of course you think of what the load is with respect to how much we bring in and what is being paid. So the FX shortages, again, is just a reminder that Nigeria continues to face that threat. The NNPC has fixed, that NNPCL rather, fixed March the 21st to begin oil drilling in Nasarawa. They've been on this since 2010, I think, and if you think about the amount of time it takes to explore the regions where they think there are hydrocarbon deposits, they've been doing this in the inland basins for quite a while. Mele Kyari, of course, the group chief executive, was saying that they need to hurry up with respect to drilling because the world is moving away from fossil fuels. I would have hoped that this discovery or this drilling would have been announced by one of the oil and gas giants, because if you think about the JV agreements that the state oil company has with them, they're the ones that bring the technical expertise and do the exploration and so on and so forth, and then they carry that out. So we'll see how that plays out with respect to how much can be brought, because we need a little, more data as to exactly what's under the ground there in Nasarawa and how long it would take, I guess, for us to be able to profit off of that. You were talking about the World Bank. David Malpass, the G20 nations are meeting in Bangalore. I think it's next week. And on the sidelines of that, he's been talking about being able to extend debt assistance in terms of restructuring for a number of nations that are under a lot of pressure. We've been talking about this with things like domestically, ways and means and other things. When there's debt on the table, you have got to do something to pay it off. And so what he's saying is that they are going to look at how to essentially just restructure the debts. It's got to go somewhere. So countries that are facing fiscal pressures and are not able to pay back money that they owe to bilateral, all these multilateral agencies, they just have to extend the debts. There's no way around it. And on the back of that, Zambia's president, Hichilema, is calling rising lending rates, a black mamba kiss of death. He said this on local radio, I think it was yesterday. Zambia has, I think, about 12.8, almost 13. Is it 12? Is it 20 billion in debt that needs to be restructured? $13 billion. Thank you. And China is their main lender. I think they owe China about 6 or 7 billion out of that 13, and so they are under pressure. And so he's coming out saying the lending rates are kiss of death. But Mr. President, they've been hiking rates for quite a while now. The global credit markets have been getting more expensive. So if you have dollar debt, it is going to get more expensive under this environment. And most of these debts are floating rate debts. They're not fixed rates, so they will move in tandem with interest rates. If Zambia defaulted on its debt in 2020, so they're facing a lot of pressure. So this is an example of what David Malpass is talking about. China has been so far unwilling to discuss extending that debt or giving any type of debt forgiveness. But why would you when you're dealing with a lender that has already, or rather a borrower that has defaulted, So it's pretty tough there. South Africa, same story. We've got civil servant unions that are looking to strike again because they're talking about pay not being in line with inflation. You heard President Ramaphosa last week at his State of the Union address, where he said that they would try to address pay and so on and so forth. They were going to extend that grants that they were giving out before COVID, but that's a grant. That's just assistance. This is worker pay. So you're looking at a possible strike. They're going to have to, the government's going to have to talk to them about it. Again, it is just part of the story around the world. It's not just South Africa, it's the UK, it's everywhere else, where workers are saying that their pay has to fall in line with inflation. And it's still back to debt. A professor, Bongo Adi, in the Lagos Business School, they had a webinar, I think it was yesterday or the day before, where they're looking at the economic projections for the country. And he was saying that lending apps are pushing more Nigerians into poverty. I think it's an economics professor. So he's essentially saying that with all the loans that Nigerians are getting, especially those at the bottom of the pyramid, they're using those loans for consumption. Yeah. So ordinarily, how would you are supposed to be able to, your loan is supposed to be for economic activity that is supposed to generate returns, as one of the presidential candidates repeats a lot on the campaign trail. So if you are borrowing for consumption, you can't pay back the loan. You are now running check to check to try to pay what you just borrowed. So a lot of lending and a lot of borrowing in today's themes for the African continent.
I'm not surprised, Rotus. This is the African story now. We all know what Zambia, the likes of them, Edgar Lungu, took this debt for. To do white elephant infrastructure. And guess what? The Chinese played along with them. But now China is taking most of the country. Most of their copper mines being run by the Chinese and everything. So these people definitely will give you the debt. Yeah. You fall into the debt trap. They take you on. And that's why it is so bad now that they can hardly restructure things. Yeah. And it's not going to get better because the Fed is going to raise interest rate more. Yeah. The inflation target in America is 2%. This 9% they just arrived, the Fed is not done yet. They're still very hawkish about the market. They're going to go. And it's going to impact you. Yeah. So the question is, when we ought to do things right, when the likes of Edgar Lungu had to think properly, they didn't think now. They were doing infrastructure. But does that look familiar? Right. It looks familiar like us here now. Yeah. We took all this debt, we did so much, we can't account for ways and means, we can't account for what we did with the money. Now it's coming back to bite us. We're having terrible FX issues. You see, invariably, Russell, what you have just said as regards that Moody's report is that Nigeria is finding it difficult to defend ordinary letter of credit. That's what it means. There's no FX on ground to be able to pay for it.
Yeah.
Why? People are stealing the Commonwealth. Crude oil thefts, massive level of corruption, unarguable subsidy.
Yep.
Because it doesn't make logical sense. And this was the same government that came into power saying it was fictitious. It's a lie. It's under, at some point they changed the name under recovery. You know, when politicians want to do change your style. And that's why sometimes I wonder, these governors, they are seeing all of this. They are not going to court as regards this.
Exactly. They are going to court for
Naira policy.
Naira swap.
You see, they are not going to court as regards this. So the fact that we can't meet our letter of credit. And you know, recently,
many of their states are in debt.
Many
one
of
of the
their
governors, one of the governors that went to
salaries.
One of the governors that went to court sacked 60,000 people since he got into power.
Exactly.
60,000 people. Right. So he said his state is impoverished due to Naira classic. He has impoverished his state more than any ever before.
Exactly.
The other one of them pay half salaries. Despite the fact that he's paying half salaries, his family members are now fighting EFCC over 3 billion naira corruption fraud money.
Yep.
Ayo, please.
And it's just on the essay on the essay matter because South Africa planned strikes, state workers strikes. The importance of this is because, like as Rufai has just mentioned, unfortunately the African problem is an African problem, and like you said, it's not really an African problem as well because of the state of the world. But what are the agitations? They are meant to have a meeting later today with their employers to negotiate their wages. However, they're saying they're not going to come to the negotiation table because last year's wage, which was increased by 3% to them, was nothing. And so if they didn't have an agreement from last year's wage, they feel there's no point going to the negotiation table again this year because it means that they've accepted the 3% hike. What are they asking for? A 10% hike in their wages so that it's in consonance with the reality of inflation on ground. What would happen at the end of the day? I mean, they've already said they're not going to go to the negotiation table. South Africa is saying they don't have the money to, the government is saying they don't have the money to meet their demands at this point. So there's an impasse. They're certainly going to go on strike, and putting that side by side, you know, on in terms of productivity, the GDP, the larger impact and effect of this. Beyond a responsible government or blaming the government is also the reality of the fact that the world is under, you know, they talked about a recession across the world this year. So unfortunately, hard times across the world, globally, and yes, here in Africa as well.
As Rufai likes to say, leadership matters, you know, so there you go.
Well, it does, but across the world as well, we're facing a recession. Well, thank you very much, Ruth, for your report this morning.